I guess when we're talking about psychics, my story is more of like a reminder that sometimes a sidekick doesn't want to be a sidekick. My non-sidekick, I guess, would come in the form of a black lab Chesapeake Bay Retriever puppy named Schnapps. See, when I was 15 years old, I really, really wanted a dog. I had watched all these movies, right, showing, a young child wandering around, falling into a well, get saved by the dog. Like, the dog meant everything. I wanted that sidekick, that puppy that would grow into a dog who would be by my side, who would be my companion. And I begged my parents to let me have a dog. Now, we had a dog growing up. Her name was Brandy. My mother named her as such because she was the color of brandy. So I decided I was going to name our dog Schnapps. For reasons why you can probably guess, I was 15 and I was familiar with Schnapps. I had convinced my parents it was just a word that I had heard and I didn't really know what Schnapps meant. They believed it, bless them. So finally my father relents and we go to the pet store and we find these two puppies, a brother and a sister, and they're in this enclosure, and there's two, right? There's a boy and a girl, and the male is laying there, chill, just kind of hanging out, looking up at us sweetly, and then the female is bouncing around like a lunatic. So of course she's the one we chose. We should have known that as soon as I picked her up and tried to like hold her even remotely still, she peed in my hands. I should have known then that that was a sign of what was to come with dear Schnapps. So Schnapps comes home. I sign her up immediately for obedience classes. Our first class, we arrive. Schnapps is at my feet looking all adorable, and she takes a massive dump. So I spend half the obedience class trying to disinfect the floor, feeling all sorts of embarrassed. Second class, we arrive. She doesn't poop, but she pees again. I spend a portion of the class cleaning up and disinfecting the floor again. By the third class, I make it to the parking lot, and as my parents drop me off and drive away, we just hang out in the parking lot and never actually go into the obedience class. I kept that up for weeks, even pretending that the certificate of completion must have gotten lost in the mail, trying to hold up this notion that I actually took this dog to obedience class when I did not. But she was a great dog, and I wanted her to sleep in my bed with me at night so we could cuddle, except she had to pee earlier than I wanted to wake up. I was 15 and I was lazy, so she would sometimes pee. And basically, I was just a terrible dog owner. And unfortunately, that meant that Schnapps did not get properly socialized. So she was a high energy puppy to begin with, and was not the perfect animal at birth that I had imagined as a 15-year-old. So when people would come to the door to drop off mail, to come visit us, whatever, Schnapps would greet them by jumping. Maybe many of you may have had dogs that were jumpers. She was a jumper, except in addition to jumping, she would fall onto her back and then urinate sprinkler style, like the Buckingham Fountain. And then she was a bolter as well. She liked to be outside, and so if the door was even slightly cracked or left ajar, or you open it a smidge to reach for something out of the mailbox, she would bolt outside, and the only way to get her to come back would be to get into the car and drive around the neighborhood screaming out the window, "Schnapps, do you want to go for a ride? Schnapps, do you want to go for a ride?" And she wanted to go for a ride. So she would get in the car, but what she was in the car, she also wanted to jump back out the window while the car was moving. So Schnapps, she had this bold personality, but I tell you what, after those moments of somebody coming to the door and her wild enthusiasm, her, freewheeling urination that spread all around the floor and our guests, after a few moments, she would calm down and that kind of chaos would simmer. And she was actually a really, really, really sweet dog. And I knew in my heart that all of that energy was something that I needed to work on, right? But I was 15 and I was an idiot. And inevitably, this went on for years where Schnapps would be crazy and my parents would say, "Why do we have this dog? And you're supposed to take care of her." And I was like, "Err." And I ended up going off to college. And while I was at college, my dad was taking care of this dog who he didn't want to take care of. And he kept telling me, "I'm going to take her to the mall and drop her off in the parking lot at 2 o'clock in the morning." And part of me knew that he would never do such a thing. And part of me thought that actually he might. And I fretted over it. I felt horribly. And I knew I was a bad dog parent. And I wondered how Schnapps was making do with my dad, who said that he didn't want to have this dog in the house. He wanted to get new carpeting, and she was going to pee everywhere. And one day I was home from college, visiting perhaps for a holiday or something, and the house we were living in at the time had a second floor that sort of peeked out over the first floor. And my dad had a little study down there where he would sit and read the newspaper and do some work. And I remember, when I coming home and my dad's complaining about this dog and whatever. And then one day I was coming down the stairs and my dad didn't know I was approaching. And so I was, up high in this, looking down to where my dad was working, and I could see that Schnapps was laying down at his feet, comforted and chill as all get out. And my dad was doing his work with one hand and watching the TV probably, and maybe, leafing through a newspaper and petting her with the other. And I knew that while I had acquired Schnapps thinking that she was going to be my perfect sidekick, and I certainly didn't do her justice, she ended up being my dad's perfect sidekick. And I went back to college and ended up acquiring a pretty good sidekick myself, which was an actual Schnapps. Thanks.